Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Firefighters podcast, where we seek to develop, inspire, and motivate the world of the emergency services operator through a series of wide-ranging conversations. Now, before we go any further, just hit that rate, follow, or subscribe button on whatever platform you're listening to. It's a key performance indicator for us and helps us reach even more people. Now, here's what we've got for you today. Okay, we're back with another debrief on the podcast. This one is the Glasgow School of Art, the fire, failure, and a building that burned twice. That's right, twice. Now, before we get into the episode, remember you can get all of the document debriefs and all of the episodes I've ever produced on the podcast in the Patreon. We'd love for you to support us. We'd love for you to make that decision to go in there. It's going to cost you £3, less than the price of a coffee. If you think it's worth it, if you think this has brought some value to you, go in there, take a look, check it out. Enough of that. Let's get into the debrief. So imagine you've just spent 4 years rebuilding something priceless. Not priceless like in the estate agent sense, like actually priceless, like irreplaceable. There's only one of these, something that architects travel across the world to actually study, something that's on every list of buildings you need to see before you die. That's this one. You spent £36 million, hundreds of craftspeople, years of paint work. You've literally recreated hand-carved timber joinery from the original blueprints. A hell of a lot of work's gone into this. You've rebuilt a library that people mourned like a person had been burned. You're nearly done, almost there. And then, one day before the final safety system gets switched on, the building burned down again. So it wasn't a small fire. It's not a repeat of the original. Literally the whole building gone. And when Scotland's National Fire and Rescue Service sends its investigators in, they do the most complex fire investigation. And they have ever undertaken anything like this. It lasts 172 weeks and costs over £127,000. Guess what they came back with as an answer? We don't know why it started. Welcome back to the Firefighters podcast, guys. This is the story of the Glasgow School of Art, and specifically the building at its heart. Let's start with the Mackintosh building. This is a story told in 2 fires, 4 years apart. Those 2 fires, between them, managed to teach us everything about what happens when a building becomes its own worst enemy, and when it costs when an organisation learns a lesson but doesn't quite implement it in time. There's no firefighter fatalities in this story, but there is some enormous takeaways for every single one of our operational staff and anyone that's trying to get into the sector listening. So whether you're a firefighter at the start of your career or watch commander trying to sharpen the skills of your crew's thinking, maybe you're someone working in the training department, you're a training officer building a debrief lesson, this is a great one for it, or you're a chief fire officer thinking about your organisation's relationship with things like this, specifically heritage buildings. This one's for you. Let's get into it. So before we talk about either fire, I want to spend some time about the building itself. Because, as I say, on quite a few of these debriefs, the building is not just a backdrop, it is a story in itself. The building is practically one of the main characters. So the Mackintosh building sits on Renfrew Street in Garnthill. I know I'm going to get that bit wrong. When I wrote this the first time, Garnthill. It's the area of Glasgow in the city centre. It's the principal building of the Glasgow School of Art, GSA, and it was designed by Charles Rennie Mackintosh. Construction happened in 2 phases. First completed in 1899, the second was 1909. Now, if you don't know who Charles Rennie Mackintosh is, do yourself a quick Google, that'll sort you out. But briefly, he's basically arguably the most influential Scottish architect and designer who ever lived. That's kind of the punchline. He's the reason Glasgow has a distinct international identity in the world of design. His buildings are studied, copied, and revered globally. The Mackintosh building is considered a masterpiece. And here's the thing about architectural masterpieces. They're not designed really to modern fire safety standards. They're designed for a different era with a completely different understanding of materials, fire behaviour, and occupant safety. The building is Category A, listed in Scotland. That's basically the highest level of heritage protection there is. Category A means the building is a special architectural historical interest. The only interventions allowed are those that preserve its character itself, so you can't significantly alter it. You cannot install something that changes what it is. That's really specific, that matters enormously, and we're going to come back to it. Now, structure itself. So the Mackintosh building is a multi-storey structure, roughly 6 stories in places, and inside it, Mackintosh created something that was visually stunning, and from a fire perspective, like quite nightmarish, to be honest. So the building is threaded from top to bottom, from east to west, with a network of original ventilation ducts These are ducts that Mackintosh designed himself. They are part of the architecture. They run horizontally through the building, connecting spaces, and crucially, one of them runs vertically, all the way from the basement floor to the roof. So think about that from a second from your operational perspective, in your operational terms, and your operational tactics. You've got a building full of timber-lined studios with original Victorian timber-framed voids, and running through the entire building, running through the entire thing, it's a pre-installed, fully operational chimney flue, basically. Designed by an architect, integrated into the fabric of the building, and protected by heritage listing from any intervention that might significantly alter its character. There were, some fire dampeners fitted in some of the ducts, but, and this is a detail that we really need to hold on to, in the 2018 fire, those fire dampeners were not operational. The construction work meant that certain systems had been temporarily isolated. So we have original timber voids, unprotected ventilation ducts acting as vertical and horizontal fire highways, if you will, heritage listing making meaningful and kind of important retrofitting extremely difficult, and a building that's been occupied and in use as the working art school for over 100 years. So the building's been flagged as a fire risk for a long time. Fire safety assessments, some 2006, 2008, 12 years for the second fire, both explicitly stated that many of the building's features failed to comply with the modern fire safety requirements and could potentially cause or significantly contribute to a fire in the building. Both reports recommended a fire suppression system. So before we go any further, here's the first lesson. And I know it's kind of a broad one, but I think it matters, so I want to put it in. When you look at the buildings in your operational area, in your patch, are you looking at them through a lens of how they're going to behave in a fire? When you're driving around, when you're walking around, maybe you live in your area, maybe you're just going around doing visits, community safety, whatever you do in hydrants, are you looking at the buildings from an operational perspective? Or are you just looking at them? You're just looking at how they look from the outside, just looking at buildings. So heritage buildings, old commercial buildings, Victorian schools, former industrial conversions as well. These buildings carry fire risks inside their fabric that are invisible from the street. Hidden voids, unprotected service routes, timber construction behind plaster work, original ventilation systems that nobody's fully mapped. So the question for you and your crew, or maybe you as part of a crew, is, do you know what's inside the walls of the buildings in your area? Not just the layout, the building structure, those hidden fire highways. I'm coining that, by the way. That's mine now. Hidden fire highways. Are you doing that? Right, let's go to the first fire. So the first fire, 23rd of May, 2014. It's a Friday. Glasgow School of Art is partway through its end-of-year degree show. Students have set up installations across the building. Studios are full of artwork, materials, equipment, and in Studio 19 in the basement of the West Wing, a student has been working on an installation project. Part of the installation involves foam panels, the kind of expanding foam that comes off a canister and sets hard. You've seen them before. Everybody's used it. It's everywhere in a lot of our buildings. Students mounted foam panels on 3 walls of the studio, and there's a projector opposite mounted on a stand. And to fill the gaps between the foam panels, the student is spraying additional expanding foam from a handheld canister. Quick chemistry lesson, and stay with me because this bit is just think about it. Expanding foam in a can, your basic Gorilla foam equivalent type stuff, is propelled by a mixture of flammable gases, isobutane, propane. These gases are used to push the foam out of a canister under pressure. And when you spray it, those propellant gases disperse into the air around the nozzle, basically. It is beyond a privilege to be able to bring the Firefights podcast to you, and we are so grateful for every single person that supports, listens, shares, and follows our journey. And to help us keep doing it, create more, reach more guests internationally, and make the podcast sustainable, we're asking for you to help. And to do this, we've set up a Patreon page. By joining our Patreon community, you will get access to every single full episode archive we have ever made. Now, hundreds and hundreds of key documents that we've got in there on fire behavior, firefighter health, cancer risks, incident debriefs, and so much more. So if you feel like you want to join the Patreon crew and help us make this possible, head to patreon.com/TFFPC or check the link in any episode podcast notes. In Studio 19 on Friday morning, those propellant gases are being dispersed in an enclosed basement studio. And directly opposite the projector is running. It's running hot with an internal cooling fan that is effectively drawing air across its energized electrical components. That's what cooling fans do. Gas, the gas from the canister, meets the electrical ignition source inside the projector, and it ignites. And the foam panels, 3 walls covered floor to ceiling in highly flammable polymer foam, are now on fire in a basement studio of a Category A listed building full of hundreds of years worth of dry timber. Let's see the response. Scottish Fire and Rescue Service received the 999 call, 12:27. And there's something significant about what happens next. From the reports we've seen, Cow Cadens Fire Station is immediately adjacent to the Glasgow School of Art. We're talking like less than half a mile. Scotland Fire and Rescue Service get their first appliance on scene within 4 minutes of the call. Great response. 4 minutes. It's exceptional. And it matters because, as we'll see, it's the early arrival that gives crews a fighting chance of the fire in 2014. Now, Scottish Fire and Rescue Service response at this fire ultimately involved 16 appliances and over the course of the incident, around 200 firefighters. But the decisive early work is done in those first minutes. Massive credit to the crews that were on that first call in 2014. They think about where those hidden highways, those hidden fire highways, where they are, where they start kicking in. And the fire in the Studio 19 has a connection through a ducting system to the rest of the building. The smoke and the heat from the basement studio travels horizontally through the original Mackintosh ventilation ducts and vertically through the main service void that runs the full height of the building. Fire reaches the Mackintosh library. Ouch. Now, the library is genuinely one of the finest interiors in Europe. Dark, beautiful timber, high-backed bookcases. We're talking film backdrop styly stuff. We're talking Harry Potter. We're talking that kind of thing. Mackintosh's signature's geometric detail. It's been called one of the most beautiful rooms in the world. And it's on the upper floors, not the basement. But the duct system connects to them. So the library burns. Scotland Fire and Rescue Service crews make an extraordinarily significant tactical decision early on in this fire, and they establish a fire break along the central stairwell. Essentially, they identify that the building can be divided into 2 halves, and if they can hold that line, they can protect the eastern half of the building while fighting the fire on the west. Aerial appliances are deployed from Renfrew Street at the front of the building, and that becomes Sector 1. BA crews are committed from the Scott Street entrance at Sector 4, working in the basement. Water's brought in, the basement begins to flood as the volume of water used to fight the fire accumulates and accumulates. So pumps are deployed to then manage that flooding. Simultaneously, and this is something that speaks really, really well of the operational response, and again, from what I can read and what I can see, banging response. Salvage operations are running in parallel with firefighting, which is exactly what you want. If you've got enough resource, it's on these plans, especially for heritage buildings, you should have a salvage plan. High-value items are quickly identified and removed. Students' work, important materials, anything that can be saved is being moved while crews are still in the building fighting the fire. Building gets a stop message on the 24th of May, the following day. At 10:20 in the morning, 7 days, 2 hours, and 55 minutes after the first appliance arrived. This is a protracted, complex, multi-day incident, and the result, approximately, from the report, 70% of the building was lost. Mackintosh Library, gone. But around 83% of the structure is still standing. Boom. Up to 70% of the contents protected, no casualties. To be fair, by any measure, pretty remarkable result, given what they were facing. Fire service appraised, and, in my opinion, rightly so. Couple of things worth pulling out from the 2014 operational response before we move on, though. So first, the fire break strategy, the decision to identify a defendable line and hold it, rather than committing everything in an offensive, aggressive interior attack across the whole building. Putting that fire break in is the right call in a complex heritage structure where you don't fully understand the internal fire pathways. You're not giving up. You're not going, oh, sorry, we can't save that. Let's just back it off. You're being smart about where you commit in terms of the risk. Secondly, running salvage operations alongside firefighting. So in a heritage building, or in this heritage building especially, protecting what's inside is part of the mission, especially, for a heritage building. That is part of one of our big tactics. It's part of our pre-planned deployment. It's part of our risk strategies. It's not something every crew discusses in their pre-incident planning, but pretty much UK-wide now, we're good at this, but we don't necessarily run drills on how to do it. In a heritage fire, what you save from the building is part of the legacy of the incident. And that takes planning and coordination. It takes and really needs to be thought about before you're in front of the building with all the hoses out. So if you're around one of these heritage buildings, make sure you have tested the salvage plan. They won't necessarily let you take things off the wall. You can't use a special pair of scissors that cuts through the multi-million-pound piece of artwork. But at least you know where it is, and at least you know how to get it off. Yeah. Third, and most importantly, I suppose, for the story that follows, was that ducting system. It's been identified as a significant factor in the fire spread. Everyone knows about it. It's on the record. It's in the investigation findings, and the recommendations include dealing with it. Then there's a restoration. So after 2014 fire, Glasgow School of Arts launches a £36 million restoration project. Jesus, somebody definitely wants this building back. It's not a repair job. This is like a full, faithful restoration, an attempt to rebuild the Mackintosh building as it was to the same materials and quality, but with modern fire safety built in underneath it. So the centerpiece of the fire safety improvement plan is a high-pressure water mist suppression system. Water mist works by releasing tiny water droplets. For anybody that's not sure, they release them across the space. The droplets are fine enough to travel into voids and ducts and suppress fire in places a conventional sprinkler system can't reach. Definitely the right solution for this sort of building. It's sophisticated. It is very expensive, but people seem to throw a lot of money into these big heritage buildings, especially the arts. They tend to love this stuff. Building a specific answer to the problem that the 2006 and the 2008 fire safety reports had already identified. So work begins. It's complex. Historic buildings are full of surprises. And in 2013, even before the first fire, asbestos is discovered in the building and the timetable slips back. Asbestos is a very, very dangerous material if it is disturbed, and it has to be dealt with in some very specific ways here in the UK. Gone are the days of just throwing it into a skip and everyone that's dealing with that getting asbestosis. So materials has to be sourced and crafted to match the original. Skilled tradespeople are used throughout. Pretty sure they came from all over the world. Progress is painstaking, and by June 2018, the restoration is almost finished. Focus on the word almost. The reconstructed Mackintosh Library, which is the jewel of the whole project, is complete. BBC actually did a documentary filming it. And on the afternoon of the 15th of June 2018, they're in there capturing it on camera. The newly built bookshelves, the recarved joinery, the restoration that cost £36 million, brought back from the ashes. Real Phoenix story. And here is the detail that I want you to sit with, because it might be the single most painful fact in this entire story. The pumps for the water mist suppression system arrived at the Glasgow School of Art on the 14th of June. Okay? So the pumps for the water mist suppression system that they desperately needed, that were raised in the investigations, looked at, sought after, purchased, arrived on the 14th of June, the day before the fire. And they were still on site, delivered. They just needed a few more weeks to be installed and commissioned. A few more weeks. Because on the afternoon of the 15th, the last contractors sign out and leave the building at 5 o'clock. 101 people had been through that building during the day, and the BBC crew had left as well. Building secured. What nobody knows is that somewhere inside the building, in a duct, in a void, in some part of the fabric that 4 years of restoration had left touched or untouched, something started to go wrong.
I have been wearing Gore-Tex for nearly 2 decades on the front line, working in hostile environments, tackling challenging incidents from firefighting to water incidents and in urban search and rescue environments. Gore-Tex have a well-earned reputation for protecting professionals in the fire and emergency services through their family of highly innovative, waterproof, breathable moisture barriers that exceeds global performance standards and are trusted worldwide. Gore-Tex, going further together.
At some point in the evening of the 15th of June 2018, a member of the public is walking around Renfrew Street and they notice a smell of burning. Not a dramatic smell, just a bit of a burning smell. Kind of thing you might attribute to a bonfire somewhere or someone burning garden waste. They don't call 999. They walk on. It's not a criticism. That's a human being, unless they've got a specific reason to contact or connect a faint smell with the building under renovation. You probably don't make the call. But at 11:10, the night security guard on duty at the Glasgow School of Arts hears a noise. He does investigate, comes back, sits back down. A few minutes later, another noise. He goes back inside the building, has a look. 23:19, he finds fire, sparks, flames, inside a crawl space or a duct on the east side of the building at the 4th floor level. He does the right thing. He calls 999 and he gets out. Scottish Fire and Rescue Service enter the story once again because they received the call at 23:19. First appliances, 3 rescue pumps and an aerial ladder from Calcadens and Maryhill stations. They arrive on scene in 6 minutes, 23:25. And again, super fast response. The stations are close. And the incident commander is a watch commander from Calcadens. Steps out on the incident ground and assesses the building. Now let's think about what they're seeing. That initial scene, what does it look like? It's just gone 11:30 at night. It's June, so it's dark, but it's not cold. The building is in the middle of a renovation. There is scaffolding up all over the gaff on all 4 sides. They're temporary site hoardings. So the building's draped partly in some sort of protective sheeting. The regular layout of the building's partially obscured, but the fire is already visible. By 23:57, 32 minutes after the first crews arrive, 50% of the building is well alive. 50% of the building. 32 minutes after the crews arrive. Let's think about that. Let that rate of development just sit in your mind for a minute, because this is the point where the building's hidden fire highways we've been talking about. Remember, you heard it here first. They make their full devastating appearance. The ducting system. The same duct systems that were identified in 2014, same system that was due to be fully addressed at the end of the restoration, the same system that was flagged in 2006 and 2008 is running through the building. And the fire dampeners that had been fitted in some parts of it, they're not operational. They've been temporarily isolated for the construction phase. So the fire, burning somewhere in a duct or void on the east side of the 4th floor, has access to a network of horizontal and vertical pathways that thread the entire building. And those pathways have something they need to burn: an unlimited supply of fresh air. Think about that from a fire dynamics perspective. A fire in a duct is not the same as a fire in a room. Fire in a room will eventually become ventilation limited, ventilation controlled, and it will start to collapse its own triangle. It will start to slow and smoke, unless air gets to it. A fire in a duct that connects to the outside, to open scaffolding, to roof spaces, to ventilation openings, is not ventilation limited. Well, depending on the side of the duct, it might be slightly ventilation limited, but in principle, it's not ventilation limited. It has as much air as it needs, and it feeds itself. When you're sizing up a building fire and you're making a risk assessment, one of the questions I think you need to have in your heads is, does this fire, not do I think you definitely need, does this fire have unlimited air? I always say to my crews, is it ventilation controlled or is it fuel controlled? In a sealed compartment, you've got time. Doesn't mean waste time, but the fire will slow as it consumes the oxygen in space. In a building with open voids connecting ductwork, scaffolding, even just an open front door and a window that's failed, outside air will be entrained. You do not have that time. You are dealing with a fire that is capable of developing faster than you can contain it in a conventional interior firefighting. Recognizing that distinction really as early as possible, changes your tactical posture, should change your tactical approach, should change your commitment decision. It changes your risk to benefit calculations. 50% of the building in 32 minutes is not a failure of the fire service. It is a physics of a fire in an unlimited air supply in a building riddled with fire pathways. The lesson is, identify those pathways in your pre-incident planning before the call comes in. Now let's look at the response for the second fire. Firstly, I want to talk about what Scottish Fire and Rescue Service were dealing with that night, because I think sometimes when I look at incidents like this, focus so heavily on the building failures and the systematic lessons that we forget to actually examine the operational challenge that was placed in front of those crews, or at least I think I failed to do that a little bit in the past. So I wanted to zoom in on this. So this is a Category A listed building in the centre of Glasgow. It's in the middle of its £36 million restoration. It's got scaffolding, all four sides, normal wooden layout, which crews would have pre-planned. And that plan has been substantially altered by 4 years of construction activities. Walls that were solid might now have penetrations in them. Voids that were sealed might now be open. The temporary fire detection and alarm system installed for the construction phase was reportedly experiencing ongoing faults in the weeks before the fire. I know this sounds ridiculous, like you couldn't write it. This is literally what happened. The building's normal access points were surrounded by site hoardings and scaffolding structures, and the fire inside is moving. First crews are making their assessment. Resources are requested to begin and arrive. The command level escalates rapidly, as it would at the scale of this sort of incident. And ultimately, at its peak, Scottish Fire and Rescue Service have over 120 firefighters on scene. 20 appliances, rescue pumps, Alps aerial ladder platform, high volume pumping units. The aerial appliance work from multiple elevations. They were attacking the fire from above and from all four sectors of the building. At some point that night, and I want you to think about what this decision feels like for a crew that's making it, call is made that interior firefighting is no longer viable. The building is too far developed. The fire pathways are too extensive, and the risk to firefighters of committing more crews into a structurally compromised fire-loaded smoke log building with no reliable internal layout information at the minute just doesn't meet our threshold. And the risk to benefit analysis says we withdraw. So the strategy shifts. You're no longer trying to save the building. You're trying to protect the buildings around it. And you're trying to make sure the fire doesn't become something even worse. And it already is becoming something worse because the fire spreads. The O2, ABC nightclub on next door to it, a significant Glasgow venue, that ignites. Neighbouring buildings in the Garnethill are at risk, and residents are evacuated from the surrounding streets. Some of those residents won't be able to return to their homes until the 25th of August, which is more than 2 months after the fire. The hydrant supplier in this area cannot keep pace with the demand. Scottish Fire and Rescue Service deploy a high-volume pump, piece of kit that's capable of supplying water at rates far beyond that of a standard appliance for any of the members of the public that aren't sure, and it pumps water from the River Clyde. The River Clyde is not right next to the Renfrew Street, so that water relay represents a significant logistical operational challenge in itself. Firefighting operations on the Mackintosh building formally scaled back eventually on the 18th of June, which is 3 days after the fire started, and the last pump leaves the scene on the 25th of June. That's 10 days in total. Let's talk about the command at the fire like this. So general command at a fire like this, there's lots of things that are going on that don't often feature in like a watch table discussion about major incident command, and they're all worth naming. So first is the transition from the offensive to defense. So this is one of the most difficult calls that an incident commander can make, not because it's tactically complicated as such, but because it's psychologically and culturally kind of weighted. You know, we're trained and conditioned, hopefully, to fight fire. The idea of stepping back, putting a defensive perimeter up and watching the building burn kind of goes against every instinct. But the alternative, which of course is committing crews into a building where they are surrounded by fire spread and fire spreading at a significant rate, and the structural unknowns, the lack of reliable layout intelligence, just can't support a safe interior attack anymore. So it puts life at risk for an outcome that probably can't be achieved anyway. Knowing when to make that call, being willing to make it, and being able to communicate it clearly to crews who were there to fight fire. That's an elite level incident command decision. It doesn't get talked about enough. Firefighters, police officers, and first responders are now stepping into environments wired with more high voltage than ever before. Everything from electric vehicles to solar panels feeding direct current through compromised structures, overhead power lines, and illicit drugs factories with improvised lethal bypasses. Any single strike in the wrong place in this type of environment can turn things fatal very quickly, and that is exactly why we've partnered with Jafco. You already know who Jafco are. They have been relied upon for decades for sturdy, get-the-job-done equipment, and they are not resting on their laurels. They are evolving to face the challenges first responders are handling today through their insulated tool range. These are purpose-built for the scenarios where contact with hidden electrical hazards isn't just possible, it is increasingly likely. Their insulated tools are engineered for real-world abuse and use, designed to keep firefighters, police officers, and all first responders alive in environments where electrification is outpacing policy, equipment, and training. And you know this. This is the kind of innovation our sector needs and the kind of investment organizations should be stepping up to support if we are serious about protecting first responders from fatal consequences. So a massive thank you to Jafco for backing the podcast and backing the crews on the ground. Go check them out, learn what they're doing, and bring that conversation into your service, because this isn't about the future, it's about right now. Second thing worth flagging is this water supply challenge that we're talking about. So the high volume pump and River Clyde relay is not something most fire services deploy on a routine basis. People will have high volume pump capabilities. They will have water plans. In the rest of the UK, National Resilience runs a lot of the high volume pumps, and services hold them for National Resilience, and they get called out to these large incidents. But large fires in built-up areas really outstrip local hydrant supply way faster than you'd expect. Here in the UK, we tap in off the domestic supply. So we are drawing off the same water that everybody else who's showering and using their washing machines is drawing off as well. So especially if a building is large and the fire's involved on multiple floors, you have loads of jets. You've got multiple jets running simultaneously, as well as all these aerial ladder platforms, which take a significant amount of water to feed. What does your water supply contingency look like in your area? Do you even know where the nearest high volume pump is and how long it takes to set it up a long distance away? A lot of people don't look at these water plans until it's absolutely until the incident itself. Sometimes they will be on a routine inspection or routine assessment. People will ask to go and look at where the high volume pumps will be deployed, inspect the area. Can you still access the site? Can the trucks get down there? How far away from the water's edge is it? How far is the line that comes off the high volume pump and how does it deploy with it? Is it still achievable? These places that you tap into, whether it's a river or a lake or a reservoir, whatever it might be, usually surrounded by a lot of foliage, a lot of natural growth, a lot of undergrowth. Is that being controlled? Is the pathway accessing it? Has it got a lock? Has it got steel gates around? Has it got whatever? Do you know what I mean? So actually testing these water plans is not an academic question. If you're an incident commander, if you're a manager in charge of somewhere that has a water strategy, make sure you test it so you're not learning to dance after the music starts. Next, let's look at the investigation and the answer that we never forgot. So after the fire is out, Scottish Fire and Rescue Service begin what will become the most complex, to my knowledge, and so the reports say, the most complex and resource-intensive fire investigation in their organisational history. There's 5 investigators going into the building. They're faced with hundreds of tons of fire-damaged debris. Some areas collapsed and compacted, some up to 4 meters deep. Everything's destroyed, literally everything. So they excavate systematically, methodically. They examine debris by hand. They reconstruct what they can. They look for physical evidence of the fire origin. They interview everyone who was on site that day. 101 people had been signed in and out of that building. All of them were spoken to. They look at the CCTV. The hard drive was, of course, destroyed, melted in the fire, so there's no footage. They look at the fire alarm control panel. Destroyed. No data. The investigation runs from June 2018 to September 2021 and 122 weeks in total and £127,000. Most complex thing Scottish Fire and Rescue Service has ever done from an investigation context. And the big conclusion, undetermined. Now, I want to be very careful here and respectful, because I think there's a temptation to treat undetermined cause as a failure of the investigation, which it is not. The cause is undetermined because the evidence that would have told investigators and would have helped complete this puzzle picture of what started the fire was destroyed by the fire itself. It's not an investigation failure. It's not an investigator's fault or a team of investigators. That is a physical consequence of a fire that has complete devastation. It's such a complete fire in its destruction to eliminate its own original evidence. But let's look at the hypothesis that they tested. The first is willful fire raising, basically arson. CCTV, what there was of it, picked up a lone figure in a car park near the building approximately 3 hours after the fire was discovered. The identity of that person was never established, and they can't rule out deliberate ignition. Why does it matter they were in a car park near it? Arsonists from a behavioral standpoint, they like to watch. Not maybe in a sexual manner for some of them, but they like to watch. They want to see the blue lights turn up to see the thing that they've done. People often return to the scene of the crime. Happens in other crimes as well. But they want to see it because that's obviously part of their thing. It's how they get their jollies from it or whatever. Second hypothesis that they had is electrical fault. The building had a complex web of temporary 110-volt site supplies, trailing leads, transformers, festoon lighting strung throughout the construction zone. Only one of those could, in theory, have caused the ignition. Any one of them, sorry. Any single one of them could have caused the ignition, but insufficient physical evidence to support the specific electrical theory was not able to be found. So the third is accidental ignition, related to the day's work. Floor sanding, lead flashing work that had been carried out on the roof, considered unlikely by investigators, but not ruled out completely. So 3 possibilities, no confirmation, and the building burned so completely that the truth went with it. So there's a lesson here, and it isn't about fire behavior or building construction. It's kind of about certainty and what we do with uncertainty. As firefighters, we're trained to reach conclusions. We like closed loops. We size up, we assess, we decide. We work in a world where delayed decisions costs lives, cost buildings, cost money. And the idea that you can spend 172 weeks on the most detailed investigation your service has ever conducted and come back with a no definitive answer, that is uncomfortable, but it does happen. And our fire service and the public and the legal system handles that uncertainty matters as well. What I'd encourage you to take from that perspective is a respect for the complexity of fire investigation. I work closely with our fire investigation teams in the organisation that I work for. I was in a non-operational role for a period of time, and part of that role was with our fire investigators. And the absence of a confirmed cause doesn't mean nothing can be learned. Everything else about this incident, the building, the ducting system, the construction risks, the detection failure, the speed of fire development, all of that is known and documented and learnable. Cause being undetermined doesn't invalidate any of that. Now, I want to go back to something because I think it's the detail of the 2018 fire that gets least attention and probably deserves more. The night security guard did not know there was a fire from the alarm. He heard something, went to look, heard something again, went to look, found it, called 999. Earlier in the evening, possibly as much as 90 minutes before the call, a member of the public had noticed a burning smell, remember, near the building and thought nothing of it. Temporary fire detection and alarm system installed for the construction phase was reportedly experiencing ongoing faults in the weeks before the fire. We don't know its status on the night because the control panel was destroyed in the fire. What we do know is this. By the time the 999 call was made at 23:19, the fire had been burning long enough to be well developed when crews arrived 6 minutes later. And 50% of the building was alight within 32 minutes of the crews arriving. That timeline tells us a story. The fire wasn't detected early. That window, the window that the 2014 crews had, because they arrived when the fire was still developing, was much narrower in 2018. By the time anyone knew, the fire was already ahead of them. The water mist suppression system designed specifically to knock down this kind of fire in the duct system of the building, pumps were in the delivery bay nearby, not installed, not commissioned, not operational. Tactical takeaways. Detection is the trigger for everything. So when detection fails, everything shifts, not by one step, but by the entire detection window. In 2014, crews had a developing fire to fight. In 2018, crews had a developed fire that they had to contain. The gap between those two situations is measured in detection, and it's also measured in lives, in buildings, in outcomes, and the gap is created by detection delay and the pace at which we get stuff done when we get there. That gap of moving with a sense of purpose when you get on the goddamn incident ground. I know everybody will say, steady on, Pete, we do that. I don't think we do all the time. I'm putting that out there. I don't think we do all of the time. Complacency, apathy, it's another automatic fire alarm, it's a nothing call. We're working in collaboration with the Blue Light Show, a national conference and exhibition built around one thing. Blue light services do better together than apart. I'm going to be there 1st and 2nd of July 2026 at the event, getting involved with those conversations and connecting with people who really care about doing the job better across the blue light sector. I'll see you there. For For firefighters, there's two things to take away from this. First, when you're in that pre-incident planning and the building's under construction, major renovation for those people, specifically flag the status of the fire detection system. It is a temporary construction system. Has it been tested recently? Is there a record of recent faults? Because a building under renovation is at elevated fire risk, and it also the period most likely to have a compromised or temporary detection system. Those two things should not coexist unchallenged. Secondly, understand that the late detection call changes your tactical options on arrival. Like I said, when the fire call comes in as a fire in a building and the information you're getting from control suggests it's already well developed, your size up, your initial actions, your 360 needs to account for the fact that you may be arriving late in the fire development. In those terms of the stages of a fire, even if the clock says 6 minutes from the call, the clock measures response time. It doesn't measure fire time. As a part of the story I find most difficult, and I want to be honest about that, because everything in what I'm about to say is factual, it's documented, so you can have a look at it. It's in the investigation reports and the parliamentary inquiry and the academic analysis, and it's genuinely uncomfortable. The 2014 fire produced clear lessons. One of those lessons was about the duct system, that the ventilation ducts designed by the Mackintosh and integrated into the building's fabrics acted as a fire highway. That was known. It was on record. It was part of the investigation findings. The plan to address it was water mist suppression, installed as part of the restoration project, which will protect the building, including those ducts. And that plan was broadly right. Water mist is the right solution. The problem is when it gets installed. That restoration takes 4 years. During those 4 years, the building is in a state of reconstruction. Passive fire protection, the walls, the fire stopping, the door sets, the compartmentation that passively slows fire spread is actively compromised by the work being done. Walls get opened up, voids get exposed, ductworks open and unprotected. Temporary door sets replace the permanent ones. And the building is at its most vulnerable from a fire risk-wise. During the period it's being made safer. And the mitigation for that, the fire suppression system, planned for the edge of the project. Scottish Parliament's Culture Committee inquiry, which reported in 2019, was called, and I think this is a phrase worth quoting directly, the loss of a national treasure. The committee examined whether the fire could have been prevented and was critical of Glasgow School of Art for not prioritising fire safety sufficiently during the restoration. Glasgow School of Art position was that the risks during construction were managed and that the fire safety improvement plan was proceeding appropriately. Evidently not. The committee's position was that the pace of the fire safety improvement was not adequate given the known profile of the building. Who's right? I don't think it's that simple. I think both things can maybe be true. The restoration was genuinely complex and genuinely was making progress, and the building burned again before it was finished. The lesson, the one that's maybe hardest to sit with, is this: knowing that the risk exists and planning to address it, not the same as actually addressing it. Planning to do something, talking about doing something, saying you're going to do something, preparing to do something, isn't doing it. The only thing doing the thing is doing the thing. There's a gap between identification and implementation. Sometimes the thing you identified happens inside that gap. And that's probably a life lesson as much as anything else from me. This is an organizational learning lesson as much as it is a fire operations lesson, but it has direct implications for the fire service and for every fire service. So stay with me. When your organization has a near miss, a fire, an incident, a close call, and you produce recommendations, how confident are you that those recommendations will be implemented before the next incident? Not planned for, not started, not gone out for tender, implemented, commissioned, operational. The 2014 Mackintosh fire was, in effect, a near miss for a 2018 fire. Same pathways, same building, same known risk, and the same building burned again through the same pathways whilst the mitigation was still being installed. The question to bring it back to us, the question for your watch table, the question for yourself: do you have a mechanism for tracking the implementation of your lessons? Not just identifying them. And I know you'll say, yeah, we've got a form that we send up to the people, and then they agree it at the risk committee, at the ops briefing board, and then if it's approved and it's above a certain budget, it goes up to senior leadership team, and they have to make a decision on the thing. And then once it's approved, then we can plan for some trials, then we can plan for some budgeting, then we go da 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 da. Identification without implementation is not learning; it's documentation. There's a difference. I want to address something that runs underneath the entire story and doesn't always get spoken about directly. Heritage buildings. They are specific and distinct category as a firefighting challenge. They're not just old buildings. They are buildings where the law, the architecture, and the community expectation around them actively complicate how we can protect them. Category A listed status in Scotland, like Grade 1 listed in England and Wales, means that any intervention has to be approved. You get stuck in the quagmire. You can't just install a sprinkler system. You can't just retrofit fire stopping into the voids. You can't significantly alter the character of the building. Every piece of fire safety improvement in the Mackintosh building had to be designed to be appropriate for the building of its architectural significance. That means slow, because it creates a genuine, serious tension. Fire safety needs says the building needs robust, modern, automatic suppression throughout. A heritage listing says any system installed must not compromise the character of the building. The water mist suppression was the engineering solution that sat in both camps, technically capable and architecturally minimal. But it takes time and money to design it, install it, commission it. Meanwhile, building stays at risk. It's not a solved problem. I don't pretend to have any answers here. But across the UK, there's thousands of Category A and Grade 1 and 2 listed buildings that contain fire risks that cannot be quickly or cheaply mitigated, because the very thing that makes them worth protecting makes the protection of them harder. You see this a lot in London Fire Brigade. A lot of beautiful, beautiful old buildings, which are a nightmare to get things changed and upgraded on. For the fire service, this creates a specific challenge. How do you plan, pre-instant planning, a building where you can't change what's inside it? You can't fully map the void, and the features that drive fire spread are architecturally protected. For any heritage building in your area, particularly one that's Category A or Grade 1 listed, your pre-planning needs to be honest about what firefighting looks like inside it, not what you'd like it to look like, what it actually looks like. A heritage building with unprotected voids, timber construction, no suppression system is a building where rapid fire development isn't just possible, it's almost guaranteed. Where interior firefighting may quickly become unsustainable, and where a defensive strategy may be the appropriate posture from very early in the incident. Doesn't mean you don't go in, doesn't mean you don't fight it. It means you go in quickly with a sense of purpose, with clear heads about what you're dealing with, and you're honest about what you can achieve. The decision not to commit crews to interior firefighting in a rapidly developing heritage fire is not a failure of aggression or whatever we want to call it. It's an exercise of proper professional judgment under difficult conditions. So know your heritage buildings, walk them, talk to the owners and managers, find out what suppression they do have, what detection they do have, and what their passive fire protection looks like. Build a relationship before the call calls in. Right. 3 things I want you to take away. We've been through 2 fires, 4 years apart, in one of the most famous buildings in Scotland. So let's bring this to a close with the things I would love you to maybe take away. Not just nod out and forget, but actually maybe take to your watch table and talk about. First thing, that hidden fire highway. Mackintosh building duct system was not just a detailed Victorian architecture. It was, again, the operational reality that shaped both fires. In 2014, it spread fire from the basement to the library. In 2018, it spread fire from wherever it started to 50% of the building in 32 minutes. Every building you cover has equivalent hidden pathways. There might be roof voids, there might be service ducts, there might be risers, there might be cavities in walls, might be an original chimney flue that's been repurposed or blocked or partially blocked. Question is whether you know where they are and how they connect. That's what pre-instant planning should look like. It's not glamorous. It's walking stairs, it's opening riser cupboards, it's asking building managers questions that what's behind the walls. But it's the difference between arriving at a fire knowing what the building is capable of and not arriving blind. Second thing is the construction site. Both of the fires happened when the building's normal fire safety systems were compromised by work. In 2014, the suppression system had mid-installation. In 2018, the passive protection had been opened up for restoration work and the temporary detection system was reported faulting. A building under significant renovation is a different building from the one you planned for. The fire risk profile has changed, the layout has changed, the passive protection may have been compromised, and detection may be temporary and unreliable. When you know a major building in your area is going into significant renovation, that's a trigger to update the pre-incident plan. So contact the building manager, find out the fire safety arrangements, what's in place during the work, and what to make sure your crews know that they're going to find if they get a call there during the build. Third is a little bit of a wide angle one, and I want to talk about learning versus knowing. Glasgow School of Art knew that after 2014, duct system was a fire spread risk. They had a plan to address it, the plan was real, and the solution was appropriate, but the implementation took 4 years, and the building burned again before it was finished. It's not a unique failure, it's a pattern. Fire safety recommendations get made, reports get written, actions get approved, and then sometimes the thing you identified happens inside the gap between identification and implementation. Fire service cannot control what building owners do with fire safety recommendations. We can push, but sometimes if it's really bad, we can enforce. But you can always be part of the conversation. You can maintain relationships with building managers of high-risk properties. You can ask questions directly and specifically. Have the recommendations from the last fire safety audit been implemented? Not just, everything all right? How's it going? Whatever. Specifically, what's changed? What's been installed? What's been commissioned? What's in point and working now? Those questions, asked in the right way, in the right relationship, might be the conversation that changes the outcome. Glasgow School of Art lost something the world can never get back. The Mackintosh building. Or at least, what it was. I mean, it's gone now. The restored library that took 4 years to rebuild, the craftsmanship and the heritage of the £36 million, it burned on the night of the 15th of June 2018 while the pumps for the suppression system sat in the delivery bay nearby. Scottish Fire and Rescue did everything they could. Crews from stations from Calcadians and from Maryhill were on scene in 6 minutes. Over 120 firefighters worked. That took 10 days. 10 days of hard-ass work by firefighters. Water came from the River Clyde, surrounding buildings, the homes, the venues, businesses around Garnet Hill were protected. Nobody died. It's not a small thing. And a fire that moved that fast in a building that complex, surrounded by residential streets, getting to the end of it with no fatalities is a serious operational achievement. But ultimately, the building is gone, and the cause is unknown. And the duct system that spread both fires was the same system that was identified as a risk 12 years before. The second fire destroyed everything. That's kind of the weight of this one, and that's why I wanted to tell it. Thanks for joining us on this operational debrief. Once again, if you want some more detail about this one and all the other cool stuff that we do, give us £3. In fact, you don't even need to give us £3. You can register for free for our Patreon and you get 7 days for free. You go in there, nick everything, download everything, steal all the documents, make sure you cancel within 7 days. Then we don't get a penny. But if you wanted to, and you wanted to give us something, because you thought maybe it'd be the right thing to do, and you want to hear us do more of these, then stick around. It's £3. And we'll keep doing these. You'll keep learning from them. And that crowdsourcing of knowledge and that rising tide might just raise all the ships so we don't have to learn these lessons again. Thanks for joining us. I'll see you next time.
Well, that's it for today, folks. Hope you took a lot away from that episode. We started the Firefighters podcast to develop, inspire, connect, motivate, represent, and most importantly, celebrate the world of incredible emergency services operators and the wider sector through this series of wide-ranging conversations. We really love creating this podcast and bringing it to so many people. Did you know you can also find these on YouTube? We do a lot of video podcasts now. You can head over to our YouTube page and follow, subscribe there. And as a final ask from us, whatever platform you're on, please rate the podcast. It really helps us as a key performance indicator to reach more and more people. I've been your host, Pete Wakefield. This has been the Firefighters Podcast. And wherever you are in the world, please stay safe, be happy, and where possible, please remember and support your firefighters and first responders. I'll see you next time.